Hey Jules,
Huh?
when were you guys? How old were you guys when you went to the home when you guys separated from Moses?
I think it was January, probably January the 5th, 1946. My mom, or January the 6th, my mom died that day. And it's the first time we seen our dad cry, because it wasn't for my mom, but losing us. They took us away from her.
And you were how old?
Right.
46, I was 13 years old.
13. Okay. So yeah, you're right. 10 years, you know.
Yeah,
you
so they were
start
about-
thinking, and plus they never had the opportunity to really
Right.
get that information.
So where did you go?
Because he was still around though.
Well,
He.
we went to our home and I ran away and lived on the streets. Hank and me was beating it up. We were farm kids, you know, so we strong. So we beat up the people at the orphans' home. So they'd
wanted to kick you guys out.
They'd strip all the clothes. They'd come in, strip my clothes off, so I couldn't get out. And then they'd tackle Hank. And me and Hank was throwing them off the banister on the second floor, and they had to.
I don't want you boys to listen to this.
Oh, and so Hank got away and he went to Illinois, to Rock Island, to our aunt at that time.
Wait, which aunt?
I forgot her name, but Hank would probably know. He
Remember?
went there. Yeah, that way they couldn't follow him, you know, because
Right.
we were. You know who she is?
Just what Hank told me yesterday.
Oh, isn't that amazing? He's talking to two different people. Yeah, so Hank got away there, you know, and then I got away. I was working, and I used
Sarah, mother's sister Sarah.
yeah, Sarah. Yeah, right, exactly. That's what was, and what happened is that while I was in the orphan's home, I used to gamble with the rabbi and the and I was winning all their money. And, you know, playing cards with them, you know, secretly and making money. And then I moved outside to get another job in that. And when it came my time to wash dishes, they would punish me and make me pay all the money I got to the guy who was doing my dishes. So I told the guy, I have to quit you. It was St. Louis is for shoes, you know, a brown shoe company and that. And I worked for a jobber where we shipped shoes to Chicago and to Kentucky and that, used shoes that were come back or defective ones. So he said, well, I'm on the board. And so he got all over them, and so they gave me a choice to get out of there. So they said if you can survive for 2 months, they let me survive. And so they allowed me my bicycle only, and then I made it down, and then I came back and got my clothes and my money that I had saved. But that's how I got out of there. But then I lived on the streets for a couple of years. But that was how I got organized. You know, I knew.
Good thing you're in a fairly warm place.
Huh?
Yeah.
Good thing you're in a fairly warm place.
Why was that? St.
Weather.
Louis?
Because you're living
Living
on
on
the
the
street.
street.
Yeah.
In Alaska, you
Well-
wouldn't make it.
Well, no, the cops were good. And I don't know if I told you
it's almost
this
time for
before,
dinner.
but the cops were good, and
Okay,
we
yeah,
had
I don't
donut
mind.
shops, worked for restaurants, and so I would roll up in the corner in the back of the donut shop. It was fairly warm, not really warm. And then
make sure you don't
we had a
break
Rexall
it.
drugstore. Well, they had the lowest temperature was 64 for the whole of the stuff in the building. So whenever the manager, but not the owner for liability, whenever the manager would open up in the morning, the cops would have them allow me to stay in there at night when it was cold. But I used to sleep in a bed with an electric thing. It's a miracle I'm alive today. One of these things, just trying to get enough heat to survive. You know, it was a tough time for me, but at the same time, it was good. And I told him when I was 8 years old, I spent a year in the hospital. I was blind. And what they did is they took little band-aids with a little hunk of radium and put it over my eyes for 6 months, let me up, and I said, oh my God, they're going to finally let me out. And they put them back on, and I stayed another 6 months. But what was really funny about it was this here, is that they would bring, I would be in a room with an old lady, and they'd pass wind and I'd laugh. And so the nurse would come in and bawl me out and said, it's better to let it out and have the shame than hold it in and have the pain. But they've maneuvered me around because every time they put me with these old ladies, they'd all be passing wit. And a little kid like me, I never quit laughing. So that's something I will ever always. The problem I had is I thought my family abandoned me because back then we didn't have hospitals, so they'd take us a long way.
Long ways, yeah.
I had hay fever, and so I was blind all summer long or anything, and I was getting blind to where I couldn't touch anything. We had a wooden stove, so every morning my mom would wake up and boil water and put rags over my eyes because the pus would dry and I couldn't open my eyes. And so she would soak that away. It'd take about 10-15 minutes every morning. And she did that for a few years before I went in for that. But radium, can you imagine it solved the problem? It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Hard to believe.
Yeah, back then that was primitive. We're talking about 70 years ago, 65 years ago.
Now, when Tilly passed away, what was the reasoning for Moses?
Huh?
What was the reasoning for Moses giving you children up, or did the state
He
take?
cried because they took us away.
It was the time.
He
It was
was
the times.
He was so old. See, my dad was what, 72 when we went to
20 years older than her.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
Well,
was
my
born in
mom was-
1875, so it was
Yeah, he
46.
was 1875 and Mom was
So he's
born in
50.
1893.
He was 56 when Hank was.
Was born, so yeah, so there's, you know.
Yeah, we was.
He was old.
But
Yeah.
I asked you a
69,
question you
70.
didn't answer.
Uh-oh.
was that?
The question is that my dad told us, and I think, if I can remember right, that he was born to his parents when he was 75, when their parents were 75 years old.
His dad was 75?
Yeah, my dad was, he told me that.
Wow.
See, so there was a 200 and some years history between my dad and his grandpa.
His father is Asher Zeller Shartsis.
And when was he born? Yeah,
He never came to this country.
no, absolutely
It
not.
was an arranged marriage.
Isn't that amazing?
And
And did you know that they owned a large business, a groceries business?
no, I was told he was a merchant in Odessa.
Well, that's a merchant. That was what it was, you know. Remember I told you when they had the pogroms, which they do in Russia, they cut the ears and nose and tongue out of these people, put them on a wagon and parade them through town. So my dad's parents would hire a bunch of Russians to stand in front of the store, and they'd paper the windows and that so they wouldn't know it was a Jew that owned the business. Otherwise, the people would tear it up based on what my father told. You have to realize we're little kids, and it's hard to remember everything. But I still say the most distinguishing thing that my dad told me was how he became in America and became a citizen by getting into the wrong line there in when he came to what's the name of that place?
Ellis Island.
Ellis Island. And the other thing is the way he explained it to us, where he went from he was in the Russian-Japanese army. I mean, the Russian army, they had to fought the Japanese, and it only lasted 2 or 3 months. And then the problem was surviving. This was they called them pogroms, where they did all of that. And the Jews were persecuted back then. And so he didn't want to live the life of his parents. And so he had 7 children, and he took the 7 children and he moved to Germany. And he explained to us this because we asked him, why did you go there? He said that when he got to Germany, you could buy a bottle of beer for 3 cents, but a loaf of bread for 5, and that meant the economy was wrong. You should have been able to buy the bread for 3 cents and the beer for 5, because the bread was a necessity. So he moved to Belgium. And when he moved to Belgium, then they decided to come to the United States in 1900. And so they got on a ship, and about halfway the ship was sinking, so they got on a ship that was going back empty and went back to Belgium. And then he got on another ship, it took him till 2002. and he came to America. And the reason I remember that so well is that he said he stood on the Brooklyn Bridge in 1903 and watched the Wright brothers fly their first airplane. Now, I don't know what kind of airplane or anything, but that's what he told me, just as sure as I'm sitting here. And so that's what I remember some of the nights. What I did is in '85, I decided to retrace everything and I stood on the Brooklyn Bridge where my dad did. I went to the Statue of Liberty and I told him my dad had been through here and they allowed me special privilege because they was redoing it to go up into the top because they didn't allow that anymore during that construction.